And this is an issue that's very important in my life because several years ago, my brother came and told me that he was gay. And at that time, I had no idea how this could have happened. He had been married for 8 years, and he had grown up for most of his life in a Christian home. And so I just couldn't figure out how he had ended up gay. And his disclosure led my parents and myself to discover 2 organizations that were very helpful, and they provided the information that I'm going to share with you tonight. So the first organization is Exodus International. Their website is exodus.to. The other organization is NARTH, and NARTH is the National Association for the Research and Therapy of Homosexuality. NARTH is a secular organization made up of researchers and therapists dedicated to understanding the nature of same-sex attractions and how to work with people that are struggling with unwanted same-sex attractions. So what I've learned is that there are 2 popular schools of thought on the issue of where homosexuality comes from. But both schools of thought are inaccurate. You see, on the one hand, a lot of people believe that it's biological, that people are just born gay. But you know what? The research does not show that at all. In fact, gay researchers themselves hypothesize that there are many factors that contribute to homosexuality. Now, on the other hand, there are a lot of people that just believe it's a choice, that people choose to be gay. Now, let me say, we do choose our behaviors, but we do not choose our attractions or our desires. So when we say people choose to feel that way, that's completely inaccurate. Because you see, desires and attractions are like feelings. They come from deep within us. They're not a conscious choice on our part. So where then does it come from? If you're not born that way, and if you don't choose to feel that way, where does it come from? Well, I believe that it is a developmental issue. And so I do want to say there are a number of factors that go into human development, and human development is very complex. So I don't want to oversimplify it, but I do want to give you an overview of what would lead to a person to having same-sex attractions. One of the factors is something called gender identity. Now, gender identity is the way a person sees himself in terms of his own gender. So that would be how masculine a boy views himself to be, or how feminine a girl views herself to be. So I want to explain to you how gender identity gets formed in a person's life. I want to explain first how it gets formed in a healthy way, and then I want to go back and explain what happens in the development of gender identity that would lead to same-sex attractions. And I'm going to explain from a male perspective because it's a little bit easier to understand. The female development is a little bit more complex. But I know. But I will go back and describe a few factors that do lead to lesbianism. So first, the male development. When babies are born, all babies, they see themselves as one unit with their mother. So all babies just think that they are one with their mother. Well, eventually, a baby is able to realize that he is not one with his mother, that he's a separate entity. Well, around the age of 1.5 or so, children are also beginning to differentiate the difference between genders. So little boys just starting to recognize girls are girls, boys are boys. I'm a boy, daddy's a boy, mommy's a girl. Well, around the age of 2.5, he now faces a challenge where he must be able to begin separating from his attachment that he has with his mother and attaching himself to his father. And so it is through the relationship that he begins to form with his father that he starts to develop a sense of gender identity. He starts to develop a sense of who he is as a male. And you see, he looks to his father to answer a number of questions for him. He needs a lot of questions answered. He wants to know, what are boys all about? How do they walk? How do they talk? How do they act? Who am I as a boy? Do I have what it takes? Do I measure up? Do you see value in me? And this is all happening at an unconscious level, certainly. It's going on between the ages of about 2.5 to 4, where he's making this break from the mother and he's attaching to the father and he's looking to the father to answer all of those questions. And so the father answers those questions by spending time with his son, by showing interest in his son, specifically showing interest in what his son is interested in. He also answers those questions by verbally affirming his son. I'm so proud of you. You're such a fine young man. You're so brave and strong. You're so special. And he conveys that information through physical touch, both affectionate touch, like hugging and holding, as well as playful touch, like playing rough together, wrestling. It's actually through physical touch and playing together that a boy develops a sense of his own masculine body. So, as he goes on, at around the age of 5 or 6, he now reaches another stage where this is usually a time when kids are starting school. And so around this age, he now looks to male peers to answer the same questions for him that he needed answered from his dad. What are boys all about? How do they walk? How do they talk? How do they act? Who am I as a boy? Do I measure up? Do I have what it takes? Will you accept me? Do I fit in? And so he looks to the other boys to discover who he is in relation to them. And now what he needs from them is he needs to be accepted and included and affirmed, and he needs to spend several years bonding with members of the same sex. You know, if you've ever noticed, when kids are in elementary school, they really don't want much to do with the opposite sex, do they? You know, girls have cooties. Well, that is a God-given stage of development, because we cannot become interested in the opposite sex until we first understand our own gender. We have to know who we are and what we're all about before we can be interested in the opposite sex. And so boys have then that steady diet of male connecting or male bonding from the time around 2.5 or so all the way up through puberty. And those 10 or so years give that child a strong sense of who he is as a male, so that when he reaches puberty, he now can begin to become interested in the opposite sex. Now he's got a good sense of who he is, so he then begins to become interested in girls. What are girls all about? They're the intriguing, mysterious other gender. So for the boy that develops same-sex attractions or homosexual attractions, this process that I've just described does not happen. So let me go back and explain what happens in that process of development. But again, I will say human development is very complex, so there are a number of factors that contribute, and I'm just going to give you a basic overview. Usually, for the boy who will develop same-sex attractions, around the age of 2.5 or so, there's something that prevents him from detaching from his mother and attaching himself to his father. Either he doesn't have a father. Now let me say this, I certainly don't in any way want to imply that all boys who grow up without fathers are going to be gay. Clearly we know that is not the case. There are a number of factors that contribute. This is one of them. And if a boy doesn't have a father figure can step in.